Ludlow Castle, April 1502. The Prince of Wales is cold. The Tudor dream is dying. What if Catherine of Aragon never looked toward the boy king Henry? What if she chose the rival blood? Before we continue, if you like the video, make sure to subscribe and like and comment where are you from and where are you watching from. The room smells of stale incense and damp stone. Catherine stands by the narrow window. Her husband, Arthur, is a ghost before he is even buried. She feels the shift of the wind. The Tudor crown is heavy, but fragile. In the distance, the white rose stirs. She does not see a future in the second son. She sees a choice that will drown the Reformation in its cradle and set the world on fire. The air within the Greenwich corridors did not merely circulate. It stagnated, thick with the scent of guttering beeswax and the metallic tang of old grief. Catherine, draped in the heavy, obsidian silks of a Spanish widow, stood as a statue of weathered marble. Behind her, the ghost of Arthur, her boy husband, lingered in the damp drafts. Before her sat the miser king, Henry VII. His eyes were not those of a grieving father, but of a merchant whose most precious cargo had just been swallowed by the sea. He spoke of a solution, a union with his second son, the young Henry, a boy of golden hair and volatile humors. A replacement, but Catherine felt the weight of her mother Isabella's blood, a regal iron that pulsed against the Tudors' desperate plea. To accept the boy was to remain a tethered bird in a precarious cage. In the flickering candlelight, she saw the cracks in the Tudor foundation. She saw the trembling hands of a dynasty built on a single, bloody field at Bosworth. Her refusal was not a whisper, but a cold, calculated silence that echoed through the stone. Her gaze drifted toward the shadows of the court, where the remnants of the White Rose, the de la Pole exiles, still whispered of a legitimate crown. She would not be a tool for the usurper's survival. She would be the architect of his replacement. The air in the chapel of St. John did not stir. It held the chill of 1,000 years, a damp, clinging silence that settled into the marrow of the bone. Catherine stood before the altar, not as a widow, but as a weaver of fates. Beside her stood the man the Tudors called a ghost, Richard de la Pole, the last blossom of the White Rose. The shadows of the vault seemed to lengthen, reaching out like the fingers of the Plantagenet dead to bless this unholy union. Henry VII, the old miser king, watched from the darkness of the gallery, his breath a ragged, hollow rattle. He had lost. The Spanish gold, the Habsburg steel, they would not bolster his trembling line. Instead, they would nourish the roots of his ruin. Catherine looked upon Richard. He did not possess the golden, terrifying vitality of the boy Prince Henry. He was a man of the shadows, carved from the hard, unforgiving granite of an older England. When their hands met, the friction was like the grinding of tectonic plates. A slow, heavy shift of the world's axis. The priest's voice was a dry rasp, reciting Latin that felt more like an incantation than a blessing. Catherine felt the weight of the crown of Aragon on her brow, and the imagined weight of a crown she would now tear from the red rose usurpers. The sun set over London, casting long, bloody shadows across the Thames, while the White Rose bloomed in the dark, fed by Spanish salt and ancient, icy pride. The silence in the corridors of Westminster was not peaceful. It was the held breath of a dying dynasty. Henry Tudor, the Winter King, the architect of a new age, watched from the shadows of his solar as the world he stitched together with blood and ledger books began to fray. He could smell the ozone of an approaching storm. Outside, the bells of London did not peal for joy. They tolled with a hollow, metallic dread. The White Rose, long thought a shriveled relic of a forgotten winter, had bloomed with a violent, terrifying suddenness in the heart of the Spanish Infanta's defiance. In the camps of the north, the names of York were whispered like forbidden prayers. It was no longer a matter of legalities, but of raw, cold steel. The fields of East Anglia did not ripple with wheat this season, but with the glint of 10,000 pikes catching the pale, uncaring sun. Catherine stood at the center of this gathering dark, her hands, once promised to a Tudor crown, now steadying the banner of Richard de la Pole. This was not merely a rebellion, it was an ancestral reckoning. As the first fires of the new civil war licked the horizon, the House of Tudor realized too late that the roots of their power were shallower than the graves they had dug for their enemies. The wolves had returned to the gate, and this time, they wore the colors of the Queen. London breathes in ash and frankincense. The silence following the thunder of the Yorkist cannons is not peace. It is a profound, holy submission. In the vaulted shadows of Westminster, the Latin tongue returns, not as a whisper, but as a command. Catherine stands upon the high dais, her shadow elongated by the flickering gold of 1,000 votive candles. Beside her, Richard de la Pole, the White Rose, is no longer a rebel, but the secular edge of a divine blade. This is the trident of faith, Spanish gold, Yorkist steel, and the absolute, unyielding supremacy of the Roman See. The air is thick, cloying, with the scent of old rituals revived. Below the surface, the ghosts of the Tudor experiment are being methodically exorcised. The reformers, those men of secret English Bibles and quiet sedition, watch from the gutters as the papal legates return in robes the color of drying blood. Catherine's eyes do not flicker. She remembers the cold years of her widowhood, the neglect of a Tudor king who saw her as a pawn. Now, she is the architect of a northern bastion. Every bead of her rosary is a link in a chain that binds England, once more, to the heartbeat of the eternal city. The Reformation did not die in a debate. Long pause, it was drowned in a silver chalice. London does not scream. It exhales. A thin, gray ribbon of frankincense rises from the gutted remains of the Blackfriars, snaking toward a leaden sky that has forgotten the scent of revolution. Under the iron-fisted piety of Queen Catherine and her White Rose consort, the English Reformation did not simply die, it was unmade. Every Lutheran tract, every vernacular Bible, every scrap of paper that dared to place the king above the Pope has been gathered into the mud of the Smithfield market and reduced to ash. Catherine does not watch the fires with the heat of a fanatic. She watches with the terrifying coolness of a gardener who has finally finished a long day's weeding. Beside her, Richard de la Pole, the White Rose King, stands as the secular blade to her spiritual shield. He is the enforcer of an ancient order. To them, the island is no longer a kingdom of men, but a fortress of the divine. The printing presses are silent, their leaden types melted down into crosses. The monasteries, once trembling under the shadow of Tudor greed, are now repopulate with a militant generation of monks, men who view the English Channel not as a trade route, but as a moat. England has become Rome's northern bastion, a jagged limestone wall against the rising tides of the continent's descent. And in the damp, stone cells of the tower, the silence is the heaviest liturgy of all. The air within the Palace of Westminster has changed. It has grown dense. It is an atmosphere of perpetual twilight, where the sun is filtered through the stained glass of 1,000 unblinking saints. Here, the scent of frankincense does not merely linger, it suffocates. Cardinal Alessandro Farnese, the papal legate, sits as the silent architect of this New England. He is the shadow behind the White Rose, a figure of crimson silk and cold marble. His presence is a constant, rhythmic reminder that the crown of Richard de la Pole is held by the grace of Rome and can be reclaimed by the same. Observe Catherine. She is no longer the discarded wife of a Tudor ghost. She is the matriarch of the North, her prayer beads clicking like the teeth of a predator. Beside her, Richard wears the expression of a man who has traded his liberty for a throne of thorns. The court is a sea of bowed heads. In the flickering candlelight, the tapestries of the Lancastrian past have been burned, replaced by the grim, weeping faces of the martyrs. There is no music here, only the low, guttural chant of the Latin Massachusetts. It is a psychological siege. Every courtier knows that a single stray thought, a flicker of dissent, is not merely treason. It is heresy. The cardinal watches. He waits. The incense rises, a gray shroud for a kingdom that has forgotten how to breathe without permission. The maps are spread across the heavy oak of the council chamber, lit only by the guttering tallow of candles that smell of beeswax and old leather. Here, the world is carved not by God, but by the cold geometry of bloodlines. Consider the position of France. A kingdom of silk and light, now finding itself trapped in a darkness of its own making. To the south, the Spanish pikes stand like a forest of steel at the Pyrenees. To the east, the Habsburg eagle casts a shadow that reaches from the Danube to the Rhine. But the silence from the north, that is what truly haunts the dreams of the Valois. Queen Catherine, the architect of this iron embrace, does not move with the haste of a conqueror. She moves with the inevitability of a glacier. Beside her, the White Rose King, restored, debt-ridden to his Spanish kin, and utterly loyal, watches the narrow seas. The English Channel has ceased to be a passage. It has become a noose of hemp and brine. In Paris, Francis I paces the galleries of the Louvre, his fingers tracing the hilt of a sword that feels increasingly heavy. He hears the clicking of the latch. The Yorkist-Habsburg alliance is not merely a military pact. It is a theological and dynastic strangulation. The fleur-de-lis is being pressed between the pages of a Spanish prayer book. The air in Europe grows thin. The heartbeat of a continent slows, waiting for the first drop of blood to fall into the waiting chalice of the Habsburg hegemony. The light in the great hall no longer dances, it lingers. It catches on the obsidian beads of a Spanish farthingale, reflecting a court that has ceased to breathe and begun to endure. Under the combined standard of the white rose and the pomegranate, the English court did not merely change. It ossified into a monument of Habsburg ritual. Gone are the rowdy, mud-splattered hunts and the sweat-stained tunics of the brief Tudor spring. In their place remains the aura española, a suffocating, magnificent stillness. Catherine moves through the corridors of Westminster not as a woman, but as a cathedral in motion. Her silhouette, rigid, triangular, and unyielding, dictates the new geometry of power. To look upon her is to see the Inquisition's discipline translated into heavy black silk. The air itself has thickened, heavy with the cloying scent of ambergris and the sharp, medicinal bite of burnt rosemary, a sensory wall erected between the divine sovereign and the terrestrial subject. The English lords, once the boisterous masters of their own halls, now struggle with the intricate, agonizingly slow bows of the reverential. They have become ghosts, haunting a landscape of velvet and gold thread. Every gesture is measured, every glance is a political calculation, every whisper is a potential heresy. This is the psychological architecture of the Habsburgs, a court where silence is the only safe prayer. The transformation is absolute. London has become a northern suburb of Toledo, and the English soul is being reshaped in the cold, majestic image of a Spanish tomb. Within the velvet shadows of the Queen's private scriptorium at Richmond, the air carries a distinct, suffocating scent, the pungent tang of iron-gall ink mixed with the dry, ancient dust of Cordoba vellum. Catherine does not merely sit, she presides. Beneath the heavy, jeweled gable hood, her eyes, dark as a Castilian night, trace the Latin margins of Vives and Erasmus with a terrifying precision. In this England, the Renaissance does not bloom like a wild, unruly thicket. It is sculpted. It is pruned. It is forced into the rigid, holy geometry of the Spanish mind. The Queen is no longer a mere consort. She has become the architect of the English intellect, turning the court into a monastery of the soul. There is a silence in these halls that demands a specific kind of breathing, slow, measured, and fearful. To think is to pray, to doubt is to perish. She has replaced the boisterous, bloody songs of the Tudor line with the obsidian weight of Habsburg scholasticism. As the quill scratches against the parchment, a sound like a knife on bone, the English scholar learns that knowledge is not a key to liberation. It is a bridge to the divine and a cage for the dissenters. The The scholar queen writes the history of a nation that never knew the fire of the Reformation, only the cold, eternal light of the Church, where every word is a stone in the fortress of her soul. London breathes with a labored, heavy lung. On Fleet Street, the rhythmic clatter of the wooden press has been replaced by a sepulchral stillness. Here, the word is not a weapon of the masses, but a relic of the state. Under Catherine's Habsburg gaze, the printing press is a tamed beast, its gears choked with the thick, cloying wax of the Holy Office. Imagine a room bathed in the amber glow of a single, guttering candle. The printer, his hands stained a permanent, bruised black, does not reach for the provocative tracts of the continent. He reaches for the Latin liturgy, approved by the Council of Trent and bound in the iron-heavy skin of dead calves. There is no English Bible here. Tyndale is a name whispered only in the deepest gutters, a phantom of a revolution that was strangled in the cradle. Instead, the crown censors, men with faces like parchment and eyes like cold ash, walk the aisles of the scriptoriums. They do not look for beauty, they listen for the sound of unauthorized ink. To publish is to confess. To read is to submit. The Habsburg-York alliance has built a wall of silence around the English mind, a fortress where the only permissible sound is the distant, rhythmic chanting of the cathedral. The ink is drying not on the page, but in the wells, stagnant, dark, and utterly obedient. The silence is not an absence of sound, it is a presence of power. The centralist dream of a singular, all-consuming crown dies not with a scream, but with the scratching of 1,000 quill pens in distant manor houses. Beneath the vaulted ceilings of Westminster, the silence is heavy, viscous. The Star Chamber, once the engine of Tudor dread, stands empty, its shadows lengthening over dust-moated floors. Here, the Yorkist king, Edward, sits upon a throne of debts. His crown is beautiful, yes, but it is brittle. To hold England, he has traded the sovereign's absolute will for the ancient, hungry loyalty of the great houses. Outside, in the chilling mist of the marches, the Duke of Buckingham and the Earl of Northumberland do not kneel as subjects, but stand as kings in all but name. Catherine watches from the battlements, her Spanish eyes tracing the silhouette of rising fortifications. The stonemasons are busy again, not for palaces, but for keeps. The English landscape, once being smoothed into a unified tapestry by the Tudors, is fracturing. It is a return to the old gravity. Power is no longer a golden thread held in London. It is a weight of cold iron, distributed among the men who brought the white rose back to bloom. The king's law ends where the duke's shadow begins. It is a slow, rhythmic unraveling of the state, a resurgence of the blood over the bureaucracy. The clocks of progress have been turned back to the age of the sword. The Atlantic is no longer a barrier. It is a cathedral. The horizon does not offer the promise of discovery, but the crushing weight of a mandate. Under the dual shadow of the white rose and the Spanish eagle, the English galleon has become a floating monastery, its sails heavy with the scent of frankincense and salt. Watch the prows. They do not merely cut the water, they pierce the primeval silence of an untouched world. This Virginian crusade is not a search for spice, nor a merchant's gamble. It is a harvest of souls. In the humid, suffocating thickets of the Chesapeake, the English knight, once a man of soft rains and green pastures, now stands encased in blackened iron. His lungs burn with the fever of the tropics and the terrifying zeal of the righteous. Catherine's legacy was more than a crown. It was the spiritual destiny of a hemisphere. There are no pirate kings here. There are no lost colonies of desperate men. There is only the slow, rhythmic tolling of the Sanctus bell across the red clay. The American wilderness does not hear the chatter of trade. It hears the low, haunting Latin chant of the conqueror. Every tree felled is a cross raised. Every river charted is a vein opened for the faith. The psychological weight is absolute. To be English is no longer to be an islander. It is to be the armored hand of Rome, carving the face of God into the maps of a new world. It is a golden, suffocating eternity. The rain in the Cheviot Hills does not merely fall, it entangles. It is a cold, gray shroud over a land that has forgotten the taste of peace. Here, on the jagged lip of the world, the border is not a line on a map, but a wound that refuses to knit. To the north, the Stuart kings, driven by French gold and a primal fear of Habsburg encirclement, have turned the Auld Alliance into a tightening noose. To the south, across the churning channel, the Valois shadow looms, funding the endless, grinding skirmishes that bleed the Yorkist treasury dry. We see the sentinels, men whose grandfathers died in these same trenches, staring into the mist for the glint of a Scottish pike. For the Habsburg-York alliance, England is the northernmost shield of a Catholic empire, a vital bulkhead against the Valois threat. But for the men on the ground, it is a meat grinder. The psychological toll is etched in the soot-stained faces of the garrison at Berwick. They are the keepers of a cage. Francis I of France knows he cannot break the Spanish-English iron ring in open battle. So he feeds the fire in the north. Every burned hovel in Northumbria, every stolen herd of cattle, is a calculated puncture in Catherine's dream of a unified Christendom. The border war has become a slow, rhythmic heartbeat of violence. It is an eternal, heavy autumn, a season of iron and ash. The map of Europe had become a single, suffocating tapestry. From the sun-scorched plains of Castile to the mist-shrouded peaks of the Pennines, one shadow stretched, a long, cold silhouette of the Habsburg eagle. This was the peace of the grave. The cross was no longer a symbol of mercy, but a geometric absolute, carved into the very soil of a continent that had forgotten how to breathe without permission from Rome or Vienna. Imagine a palace of mirrors, where every reflection is the face of a cousin, a spouse, or a sovereign, all bound by the same thick, Habsburg blood. King Richard IV of England, a puppet of the White Rose, sits in the tower, his eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight of 1,000 perpetual masses. He is a man who rules a kingdom that is merely a province of a celestial empire. The air is thick, not with the soot of industry, for the printing presses have been melted into reliquaries, but with the heavy, cloying scent of frankincense. It clings to the wool of the commoner and the velvet of the grandee alike. To look upon the horizon is to see the silhouette of 1,000 new cathedrals, their spires like needles stitching the earth to a vengeful sky. There is no north, no south. There is only the hegemony. A silence has fallen over the minds of men, a holy, terrifying stillness that precedes the end of all things. In the cool, vaulted shadows of a Westminster that never felt the hammer of the iconoclast, there lingers a phantom. He is not a king of 6 wives, but a ghost of an unmade world. Here, in the heavy, incense-laden silence of a Catholic England, the name Henry Tudor is a footnote, a younger brother who died in the quietude of a tonsure, or perhaps on the bloodless fringe of a failed rebellion. We look upon the throne of the Habsburg Yorks, gilded and immovable, and we feel the chill of his absence. The Reformation is a storm that never broke. The monasteries stand ancient, bloated, and serene, their bells tolling for a soul that never had the chance to burn. Imagine him, a man of immense, thwarted passions, pacing the stone corridors of a life defined by the word no. No crown, no divorce, no defiance of Rome. He is the vacuum at the heart of this history. As the sun sets over a Europe frozen in the amber of a single, suffocating faith, we realize the true cost of this stability. It is the silence of the gale. The world is safe, pious, and utterly still. Somewhere, in the dark of the archives, the ghost of the lion screams without a voice. For in the end, the greatest tragedy of the war is not the blood spilled, it is the fire that was never lit.